Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Monday Tsene. This week's edition is going to be on men and mental health and what makes it difficult for men to access mental health. I'm going to start off by reading a piece that one of my patients shared with me while I was in the process of preparing for this talk with you this morning. According to the latest estimates, one person commits suicide every 40 seconds globally. There are 31,536,000 seconds in a year, which means 788,400 people commit suicide each year. Life can be such a difficult experience sometimes, if not every day. The ratio of male to female suicide in South Africa is 4:1. For every woman that commits suicide, there is 4 men that also commit suicide. But more women are diagnosed with depression than men. The main reason could be that women are very likely to seek help and men just die in silence. My own experience with men and mental health is that most of them avoid seeking help for a variety of reasons. One guy told me that a man doesn't do therapy and that I must just get a group of other men to talk to. He seemed appalled that I was doing therapy, and maybe herein lies the problem. Apart from whatever preconceived notions there are about therapy, men seem to maintain this facade of strength. Men must be strong, men cannot cry. This very facade is one of the reasons it took me so long to actually go to therapy. But I would like to know more and explore the reasons as to why men don't seek help and what their view is when it comes to mental health. All this emotional repression and suppression in men is part of what causes our social ills of violence and abuse in many forms. It's tragic, to say the least. To answer and maybe to explore some of the issues that make accessing mental health quite difficult is to actually look at some of the fundamental reasons why it is difficult. One of the most fundamental and probably primary reasons why we struggle to access mental health is language. Language plays a huge part because if we don't know how to say what we feel and we don't know how to express it to other people, how can we begin on the process of even getting help? This leads on to what we often say as a lack of awareness about mental health. But it is very difficult to create awareness about something that you don't know how to communicate. And so part of what needs to be addressed is definitely the language, but also to pay more attention to it, because awareness brings about attention to the subject matters that we are engaging with. In addition to that, we have some structural difficulties, and that is often with location, the population group, as well as provision to access of mental health services. Part of the other difficulties that make accessing mental health quite difficult is often from internal factors and that we are often not aware of. Stigma is probably one of the biggest contributors to barriers to mental health services. And so if we feel shame around accessing it, if we feel fear about what others will think and what others will say, then it makes it extremely difficult for us to ask for help. Another reason that we often overlook is socially accepted bad coping mechanisms or poor coping mechanisms, to say the least. Often males will have a difficult time and the immediate answer is, let's go have a drink, or maybe let's do a line of this to take off the edge, or maybe let's pop a pill to do this. And all those ways of coping with it make it extremely difficult for men to actually distinguish when it is appropriate to get help for mental health. And so they learn how to suppress and bottle their feelings. Another aspect of it is that often men are seen to be angry and men are seen to be irritable and all sorts of variants around it. And these are socially acceptable things because it is the macho and the masculine thing to do. And that makes it actually quite difficult for us to access what the person is feeling and for them to inevitably seek the help that they actually need rather than to just act out the whole time and that be normalized. But I think what plays a part of that we are often not aware of is there is another side, because femininity and feminism as a whole, for lack of a better term, is almost the opposite. And so for the two to live, or for the two to coexist at least, there's often a notion of extremes, for lack of a better term. And so it is important for us to also acknowledge the role that that plays, and possibly finding a way that both of those views and ways of being can contribute to a whole structure of how men can access mental health. And I look at that almost as humanity. But if we look at humanity really at a primary and a fundamental level, then we have to address child rearing practices, because all the things that I have mentioned before largely involve that. And if we do not get the language right at a very young age, then it makes it very difficult for any awareness to come about, for us to implement the correct structures that will allow access to mental health, to even health providers that will situate themselves in such a way that they are more accessible to people. And then stigma comes along, and then the role differentiation of masculinity and femininity come about. And so I got another additional extract from one of my patients, and I think he typifies what the actual problem of accessing mental health is. So he had this to say: growing up in a very strict Calvinistic and very strict role separation home, it was very difficult to seek help for mental illness. Initially, I was in complete denial and convinced myself that the problem lies with everyone else. So when I lost my temper at work and was forced to go and see a psychologist, I only did it because I was forced. As time went by, I always knew I suffered from depression, but did not seek help because it was not the man thing to do. It is a sign of weakness. Man up is what I told myself. Only when I was told by the staff nurse, with whom I had a very good relationship with, that she believed I was suffering from depression, had I decided to make an appointment with the psychiatrist that I was correctly diagnosed by. A year later, I had my first complete meltdown, and a year after that, I had another one. I felt very embarrassed and guilty. I was raised to think that you keep your feelings to yourself. Never discuss your feelings, never show emotion. Men don't cry. I thought I had a very normal childhood. But my adult behavior was rooted in what I believed my childhood taught me. Always to be the bigger person and ignore my own wants and needs. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is part of the big reason why accessing mental health for men, leave alone women, is extremely difficult, because of child rearing practices. And if we are not addressing this at a fundamental level, then we have no chance to establish any form of change at a holistic level, at a macro level, at all forms of levels. And with that, I want to say thank you for tuning into this week's edition of Monday Tsene. May you have a good one.